We actually did it this time.
Yes, it's a huge success. That only took like 3 seconds.
I know, that was great. For those of you that don't know, we go on many platforms. We go on Instagram, we go on Facebook. We get on about five or six platforms all at once. So it takes a little bit of coordination. But I'd like to welcome you today to Sand and Soul. This is a program we do at 11 o'clock every Tuesday. We talk about real estate in the South Bay in Los Angeles. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Stuart Fournier. I'm a 25-year veteran of the real estate industry here in Los Angeles and specifically the South Bay Beach cities. And it's my pleasure to introduce.
My name is Anastasia Bonholzer. I am a mortgage broker with AMS Mortgage Services, also known as your loan queen, and I service here in the South Bay, all of Los Angeles, and I'm also licensed in Texas and Florida. And so nice to be here with you, Stuart. The end of summer, the kids are off to college. Mine is back to third grade, so that's exciting. More time
Yeah,
to ourselves.
a little bit of a contrast there. Chloe is going to Boulder, Colorado as a freshman, so we're excited about that.
Wow,
Big deal in the
congratulations.
Fournier family. Also, empty nesters, which is a subject we should cover at some
Yeah,
point in time.
that's a good one.
Way too emotional for me to cover today, though. I
Yeah,
can't do
no, I get
it.
it. Of
So
course, of
today,
course.
what we're going to talk about is what a seller's market is and what a buyer's market is, and in actuality, what that means to you as a buyer or a seller. You know, very often real estate professionals use a lot of nomenclature that kind of, I think, sometimes goes above people's head because we talk about certain terms all day long. But one of the things we like to do on this show is simplify things for you. So I know it may seem kind of silly to have to explain what a seller's market is or a buyer's market is. But look, the fact of the matter is that people don't realize how, may not realize how important that is when you're in the buying selling process.
Yep. I agree. I agree. I think timing the market is one thing, but understanding how much inventory there is out there, what are the different sales price of homes, and maybe even going back to what time of the year is best to buy or sell. Sometimes that is important as well, depending on the ultimate result. You know, what is the buyer or the seller trying to do when they're trying to transact in real estate, right?
Right, so we're going to break that down for you today. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is make sure that you all know that you're more than welcome to come on the show right now. Go in the comments sections and ask us any questions you may have. We'll be happy to share that with you. So let me get started. We're going to be on for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm going to get started by explaining what a seller's market is and a buyer's market is. And it's pretty simple, really. A seller's market basically means that uh, there's very few houses for sale in that your specific area, but there are a lot of buyers. And so as a result, the seller has a better position in negotiating because unfortunately, as a buyer, you don't have too many choices. Now, a buyer's market is obviously the absolute opposite. You have a number of houses out there that are for sale, and so you kind of have your pick, and there's not a whole lot of buyers out there. So there's basically more sellers than buyers, and so you're in a different position to be able to negotiate. So those are the two distinctions, but why should that matter when you get started? Well, the most important thing is to realize what your position is. Now, we bring this up today because the good news about what's going on recently and lately is that we're not in either market in a strong way at all. We're in what we call a traditional market right now. And what a traditional market means is that neither side necessarily has the advantage over another right now. We don't have extreme inventory loss and we don't have extreme buyer loss. So we kind of have a great situation for you. As realtors, we actually appreciate the traditional market more often than not. And the reason for that is there's a lot less stress involved. There's a lot more time that can be taken in strategizing for negotiations, and it just makes a whole lot more sense. Let's talk about, for example, in a buyer's market, how stressful it could become. And Anastasia, you know that more than anybody, how stressful a buyer or what a buyer goes through when they're strategizing just the loan for an offer. For an offer,
Yeah.
would you like to get into that for a second?
No, Oh, most definitely. I mean, obviously, if there's very little inventory, what we look for is how to make ourselves stand out among 20, 30, 50 offers. Just like we had during COVID, we actually had an influx in inventory, but we had even an overwhelming influx of buyers coming in due to the lower rates. So that what that presented is a bidding war. You know, you have the blood pressure goes up. You're kind of in an eBay type of environment. You want to be the
Right.
bidder, and the negative aspect of that type of environment is potentially overpaying and your property not appraising at the value that you want to purchase it for just because you want that property that bad. And
Right.
so typically individuals with lower down payments, lower FICO scores tend to lose out in that type of environment because a lot stronger competition goes out. You know, and if the seller has a choice of somebody who has a 600,000, you know, I mean, realistically, 5% down, or they have a 50% down offer, they're going to go probably more than likely the one with the higher down payment, the higher terms, and the shortest terms, which can be cash also. It's hard to compete in those types of markets for a buyer unless they are fully underwritten, which is a term that we use to compete with cash. That means the buyer already been fully vetted by the underwriter. And if we go the conventional loan or FHA loan, we can do that and we can basically deliver an approval, a loan approval alongside the offer, and we can compete as cash in that case, which
Right.
is
And and you know what? That's a very difficult proposition for even the buyer's agent to get across to the seller, because the seller wants at least the least amount of static in their decision making. So getting that point across is why you need a professional realtor who knows what he or she is doing and
yeah.
presenting exactly what Anastasia just said. It's difficult. It really is in a buyer situation. So let's jump into seller's market. What is the pressure there for a seller's market? Um, how does that relate to loans?
Um, I mean, in that case, there's a lot more competition. So potentially an advantageous position for the buyer is to get a lot more credits. So potentially we're buying down the rate. We have just a lot more inventory, so people get to be a little bit more picky. We're really taking our time in understanding what does the buyer want. And usually that it's not that easy. It's usually they come with higher terms. Perhaps what we've had recently is an example of that. The buyer was dealing with higher interest rates. So even though maybe there's fewer competition out there because the terms for their loan are not as good as before.
Right.
But like the cliche is, you have to buy the home, you marry was it marry the house, date the rate kind of thing. I mean,
Right.
as cliche as it
Right.
sounds, you have to buy the home for when you can afford it, when you can afford the mortgage payment. And if those interest rates do climb down, which it's a cyclical market, they go up, they go down. It's really, you know, we can't project or foresee what will happen in the next 2 to 5 years, but we do know the market will eventually go up. It
Right.
will eventually go down when it comes to interest rates. What realistically won't go down is the how much is it going to cost somebody? What is the purchase price of the home, which will never change.
Right. And one of the things that we do in a situation like that as realtors, if we find, for example, that there's a discrepancy with the appraisal, in other words, the appraisal comes in higher than the agreed upon price, what
Yeah.
happens? Well, in that situation, obviously, someone like Anastasia becomes very important, because what you can do is you can ask the seller for a credit back on whatever that gap might be.
Yeah.
Obviously, the gap can't be extreme, but if you don't have enough money because the appraisal didn't come in and the loan company can't loan you, there is the option to have the seller actually uh, accept more for the house, but then give that credit back to the buyer when they
Yep.
close. So again, you have to know which market you're in and what position you're in before you even get started in this process, because if you don't, people are just going to pass you right up. They're not going to give you the time and patience that it takes to understand that you don't understand the market. So you need
Yep.
a professional, you need two people that work together like Anastasia and I do, to
Yep.
make sure that we're presenting yourself, whether it's the seller or the buyer, to a situation. And we've had occasions where, for example, even representing a seller, we will contact a separate loan company, or in this case, I would contact Anastasia and say, hey, do these guys really qualify? My
Yep.
seller has someone that they're very interested in, but they have a question about this or that with
Yeah,
regard to
cross
the buyer.
qualifications are a good tool to have. So if you are a homeowner and you want to sell a home, and obviously you don't know loan terms, you don't know which offer is the strongest, get a lender involved. We'd be happy to cross qualify your offers at any point. And we're not there to steal the buyer. We're there to
Right.
actually just determine which is the strongest offer out of the 10, 20, 30 that you receive. Stuart, I have a question for you. What do
Sure.
you think? I mean, everybody wants to project. What's going to happen, do you think, in the next 6 to 12 months? I mean, what's the word on the street in terms of what market potentially we may have?
Well, you know what? The truth of the matter is that realtors that have been around for a while can pretty much predict 6 months out. We're pretty comfortable with that. And I believe right now that we're going to remain pretty stable. We're not going to see a tremendous increase in pricing. And I don't think we'll see a decrease in pricing either. Look, for
Mhm.
example, let's talk about Manhattan Beach. Manhattan Beach actually last year gained $1 billion in property value. They went up 5%, excuse me, 5% last year and increased by $1 billion, not $100
That's
million,
great. Yeah,
$1 billion, right?
that's
And so, why
fantastic.
is that important to anyone that's listening? Because obviously, not everybody lives in Manhattan Beach that's listening. It's important because you get a sense of this sort of anti-California movement that's trying to tear our state down in terms of its value and the fact that people want to live here. Well, guess what? $1 billion kind of speaks for itself. You know, the value's not going anywhere. We are increasing. Of course, the city municipalities love it because they get a little more in taxes, and that's great too. But the bottom line is that when you're looking at the top of the pyramid and you look at how that'll affect you in Redondo, Hermosa, El Segundo, Palos Verdes, Torrance, and all those areas, there is a wave of value that will continue to go up. So I think the news is pretty good. However, caveat, of course, is that we, don't have a sense of what our president's doing from day to day. That's pretty well established. And so there is kind of this, in some ways, a false ceiling that everyone's worried about. But so far, the projection basically is that we will be going up and down based on some of the administration's secure or insecure, whichever way you want to look at it, movement. But it is movement that kind of goes from day to day. However, what we've seen in the last 6 months is, in spite of that, the values and the markets pretty much
Resilient
stay the
market.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, resilient market continues to rise. And also, important point to make is there, when the news and the media talk about the sellers of the buyer's market, they talk on the national level. They cover the general broad strokes. And here, it's important to really talk to a realtor and a lender in the local market. We are hyper focused on our market, and sometimes what the general nation is doing and what's happening in the Midwest completely irrelevant to what we're happening in the South Bay.
Right, and that's a skill that your realtor in this particular area really has to have, because let's face it, you have houses that are 10 to 20 to 25 million in Manhattan, Hermosa, right on the water. And 2 miles away, you have homes that are in the $500,000 range. So we have a very unique area, especially here in the South Bay and the beach cities, wherein you have to know your markets, and you have to know exactly what the variables are. Tremendous difference in house value, and of course, a tremendous difference in the kind of jobs and outlook that wealth management that people have. So it's a very important thing to do. And we that have been in the business for a long time don't, to be honest with you, pay a whole lot of attention to the national news when it comes to real estate, because the variables are so enormous and so far off in terms of the reality with those of us that are in the trenches, those of us that are in the first line of negotiation. we know they don't really what's going on in our neighborhood. So reading the national headlines does you absolutely no good whatsoever. Really, it doesn't. I could go on and on for hours about that. But Anastasia, you're absolutely right. You do need a
Yeah,
local
now that
professional.
now that the kids are back, I think we're going to see a little uptick in terms of the transactions. Most people are finishing up their vacations, eminently this week, next week, and I think we're going to see a lot more opportunity to transact at a faster pace, in my opinion. So if there's anybody out there who needs any expert advice, we're here for you, and I think reach out because consultations are free. We give those out for free. I mean, it's not a big deal at any point in time to reach out to one of us to talk about your specific scenario if you wanted to buy or sell or invest, whether it's here locally or even out of state.
And I can tell you from a realtor's point of view, this is the best time in August to strategize for the new season, which usually starts after September 30th when people go back to school, Labor Day, obviously, and getting your house ready and getting it ready for sale takes weeks sometimes. Shouldn't take days. If you're doing it for days, you're doing it wrong. It should take a couple of weeks actually to get ready and do it right. And we'll get into that a little bit more in another show. So we've gone past 16 minutes, and Anastasia, I understand you're off to Europe next week.
I am off to Europe. I'm celebrating a birthday on Friday, so I'm going to be with my mom in
But I want
Europe.
to tell you that doesn't mean she's not available, people. I've seen her be
No, not
available
at
in
all.
Europe, right?
Not at all. I'm taking my computer, my iPad, my phone, all my IIIs. I'm taking with me, and I'll be still, a call away. But
And I have seen her respond, so don't let that deter you from contacting her.
thank
Anyway,
you.
if you have any comments or suggestions for our show and you want to talk to us, please feel free to reach out. We're very communicative and we'd love to hear from you. So we'll see you next time on Sand to Soul, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.